Now, each week on Ask Alexis, you get to ask a question and we find an expert who can tell us the answer. And this week, listener Agnes has got in touch with a surprising piece of trivia she recently learned at a cocktail party. She was told that the colour brown doesn't actually exist. So she wants to know if this is true. What is brown? Is it a colour? Is it a mirage? Is it an illusion? Well, Agnes, we have found the man to answer the question. Professor Steve Westland. He's a professor of colour science and technology at Leeds University and joins us now. Professor, thanks for giving us your time.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me onto the show.
Is this just malicious gossip, Professor? Does brown actually exist as a colour?
It is malicious gossip or maybe just a misunderstanding. Of course it exists. Just because we don't call it sort of dark orange, we call it brown instead. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. As you said, your shoes are brown, maybe, and you have other brown things. We also don't talk about light red. We talk about pink instead. It's the same thing.
Right. So where does the term brown come into play? Is it because it's easier to call something brown than to call it deep orange? And it's the same with pink. Instead of saying, well, light red, well, that can be sort of misconstrued. We've given it the name pink. Are we saying that these colours, of course, they exist, but their official names are not pink and brown?
So the official names are pink and brown. So it's interesting that we tend to have a special word for dark orange and a special word for light red. Mm-hmm. But other languages may use terms like light red and dark orange. And to give you an example, we have a term for light blue. Italy doesn't. Italy have a term for dark blue. They call it dark blue. But for light blue, they have a special word, like our special word brown. Their special word for light blue is azzurro. People may have heard of the Italian rugby team being called the Azzurri.
That's right.
Light blue. Right. So different languages occasionally have special words where you might otherwise use, for example, light or dark.
Okay.
As for why, it's very difficult to say. I mean, the word brown has been used in English for at least 1,000 years. And it's a sort of a mix of linguistic, cultural, and also perceptual science to try to understand where these words came from and why, for example, we use brown rather than dark orange. I don't really know. Even I don't know the answer to that question.
Now, chatting about this in the office, another question came up, which is all about the colour black. And someone said, well, actually, you can't call it a colour because black isn't a colour. It's the lack of colour that makes it black. Could you help settle an office argument?
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't agree with that one either. So I've actually been sort of answering questions from the public about colour, mainly on the internet, for at least 20 years. And the single most frequent question I get asked is black a colour? Mm-hmm. And I annoy lots of people when I say, yes, it is one. So I don't agree that black is the absence of colour. Black is a colour, and also white is a colour, and also grey is a colour.
So what qualifies something as a colour?
It's just, I mean, colour is an attribute of things that we see, you know, mm-hmm. And it's just one of the attributes of things that we see, you know. We see things that are shiny, you know, we see shapes, and we also see colour, their perceptions. I think that's about as far as I can say about that.
So there doesn't need to be any special prerequisites. I think I remember a lot of people maybe misremember, perhaps, growing up as kids, saying there's the three basic colours, your red, blue and green, and every other colour is just a combination of those. Therefore, they're the only true colours. Do you think that's where a lot of misconception about the way you think about colours comes from?
100%. So I'm actually in a group called the Colour Literacy Project, where we're trying to change the way that colour is taught. Because lots of the things that are taught about colour to the general public, mainly at school, are simply wrong. So, for example, the idea that black is not a colour is not correct. The idea that you have three primaries is not really correct. the idea that red, yellow, and blue are good primaries is definitely incorrect. And the idea that you can take red, yellow, and blue and mix them together and make all of the colors is also not true. And yet those things are actually being taught in schools and in colleges. So our project, which is called the Colour Literacy Project, if you search on Google, you can easily find it, has a list of lots of these misconceptions which are being taught at school, and which the public generally believe.
So, I mean, you've just destroyed one of the things that I genuinely thought was true, that with those three basic colours, you can create every colour that we know of. And you're saying that's not quite the case.
It's been known. It's not true to say it's not quite the case.
It's just false.
It's false. It's been known to be false for at least 100 years. And you can demonstrate it easily to be false. You know, I could bring it, if you're in my lab, I could demonstrate it. But it continues to be taught.
Why are we so bad at explaining colour then? Or teaching, even more important. I mean, we're talking about something that's quite important. We see, talk, interact with colour every day in our lives, and yet you're telling us that what we're being taught at school is well, factually incorrect. Why is that persisting?
It's interesting. If you spoke to an artist, for example, they would all know you can't make all colours by mixing three.
Yeah.
Why would you, for example, sell boxes of paint with all those different colours if you could do that?
It's a very good point.
And yet it continues to be taught. And I'll give you a reason for why this particular one is taught. A lot of people confuse the word colour and hue. So hue is whether something is like red, yellow, blue. Colour is the whole thing. So black doesn't have a hue, for example, but white doesn't have a hue, but it's still a colour. Two colours can be the same hue, but different if one is lighter or one is darker. So you can imagine somebody said at some point, did you know you can make all hues by mixing three colours? But they knew you couldn't make all colours, you could make all hues. And then the person who they said it to somebody else, but they conflated these two words and thought hue and colour were the same thing. So that it gets passed on in a chain, and the next person says, did you know you can make all colours mixing three colours? And so whereas artists, for example, practicing artists would know you can't do this, I hate to be, I guess I can be slightly rude to teachers because I'm a teacher myself. But teachers often teach what they were taught.
Yeah,
it's divorced from practice. You know, the theory of colour, which is taught in schools, is divorced from practice. People are taught it. You were taught it when you were at school. If you gave up your radio career and became a teacher, and you were asked to teach children about colour, you teach them that. It just gets passed down, unfortunately. But we're trying to change it, and we're working with several schools, including one in Manchester and one in Canada, to try to work out how best to change this situation.
Okay. Professor, thank you so much for giving us your time. It's been it's been an education speaking to you. And I know some people still disagreeing here on WhatsApp, saying black and white are not colours. It's a physical fact.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. I think I'm going to bounce.
Send them my way.
I will.
You can easily find me at the University of Leeds.
I will. Professor, thank you so much for giving us your time. I have to leave it there because we have to go to the news. That's Professor Steve Westland, Professor of Colour Science and Technology at Leeds University. I've been looking at their website, the Professor mentioned. You can find it, colourliteracy.org. That's colourliteracy.org. And who is this? David, who WhatsApped in. David, go to colourliteracy.org. And black and white are colours. I think you were talking about hues there, as you heard from the professor. How fascinating. Thank you so much to Agnes. There you go, Agnes. You can go back to your cocktail party and educate them. And remember, if you have a question, whatever it is, then two ways to get in touch. The best way is to email us at askalexis, all one word, @times.radio. That's askalexis @times.radio. Or now you can it's even simpler. You can even send a voice note via our WhatsApp service on 0333 003 2353. That's 0333 003 2353. Just send us a voice note now, so producer Michaela is going to store it, and we'll find the best placed expert, like the professor there, to answer your question.